Let's do this Java LeetCode problem where we need to find the index of the first occurrence of a string. We're given two strings, a needle and a haystack. We want to return the index of the first occurrence of the needle in our haystack, or -1 if the needle is not part of our haystack. We're also given some examples here, as well as some constraints. Now try this out on your own. If you want to do it together, you've come to the right place. Let's do this code. So I know that I want to look through every character inside of this string, so I'm going to use a for loop. It's a fixed length, so we want to run this as long as our int. I'll just do a is equal to 0, and a has to be less than our haystack, because this outer loop is going to be what it's based on. It's going to be based on the length of this string, and then we're going to have a plus plus so that we can look through every character and eventually get to the end. So this is the full outer loop. This is going to allow us to go through every element inside of here. Now, inside of here, we can do a check. We want to see if, and let's just take this first example as our example, we want to see if the first character of our needle is equal or equivalent to the character that we're currently looking at. If it is, we are going to go into another loop and then compare the next characters. So let's do that next. We're going to say if the needle dot charAt, so we get the character at the 0th index right here, and we're going to compare it to the haystack, and it's going to be haystack, and then we're going to do dot charAt, and we want it to be based off the a index so that we can compare the different indexes. Now if it is, we are going to want to be inside of here, and what we're going to want to do is compare the next elements of this with our string needle right here. Now I don't want to increment our a because we need to use this to go through and compare every single character, but we need to look at the next values of our haystack. And so I'm going to make a new variable called index and set it equal to a. And this is going to allow us to save this position and then look at the next ones without modifying the current place of our a right there. So int index is equal to a. Now is where we're going to do the comparison for the inside part, where we want to look at the elements based off this needle right here. So we're going to do a for loop. We don't want it to run out of bounds. And actually saying that, we can make sure it doesn't run out of bounds inside of this header right here. Notice, we don't need to actually run the full length of our haystack. We only need to run the full length of the haystack minus the needle length. And this is because if we come to the very end right here, like let's say we are at in our haystack and we are currently at this value right here, and it doesn't equal to the start of our needle. Well, our needle is 3 characters. We only have 3 characters left. If this isn't our needle, then nothing is going to be our needle, and we can just exit. It's going to help our runtime just a little bit, but we can do minus needle.length, and this will prevent any out of bounds running right here. So back into our for loop, sorry for getting off track a little bit. We're going to have int b is equal to 0. This is going to be the 0 index of our needle, and that's what we're going to use to compare to our haystack, which is at our int index. So b has to equal 0. Now again, we don't want this to run out of bounds, so we are going to want to run this for as long as it's less than the haystack length. So we're going to say as long as b is less than our haystack.length, we are going to be inside of here, and we're going to have b plus plus, and we want to have index plus plus. So we're going to want to increment both of these every single time this for loop runs so that we can compare the next value. Also, we don't need a semicolon there, my mistake. Inside of this for loop, we are going to want to have 2 conditions. First is going to be our if statement, and the if statement is going to check if these 2 are not equal. And by 2, I mean if the current b, so our current charAt needle, and the character at our index in the haystack, if they're not equal, well, that means they're not equal, right? And so we want to return from there, because they're not equal, this isn't what we're looking for. So we're going to say if the needle dot charAt, and this is based off B, this for loop is basically to go through the needle and compare it to our haystack. So if needle.charAt B does not equal to, we're going to now have our haystack, and we're going to pass in our index, then we are going to want to just simply break. And what our break does is it breaks us out of this for loop right here. However, we're still inside of this for loop and we can run it again and keep comparing. We're just done with this because there's not an equivalent here. We've not found what we're looking for. However, if they are the same, we are going to want to keep going through this for loop until we reach the end. So this else if statement is going to determine where the end is. And the end is going to be where our B is equal to the last index, right? So that's going to be our needle.length, and we're going to do -1 because remember length is going to be one more than index. So to get the index, we do length -1. And this is going to check for the end right here. If we're at the end, then we can just simply return the current A that we're looking at. And this is why, or one of the reasons why, we don't want to increment our A, because we want to get the start of where it is equal to each other. We also need to look through every single character inside of here, so that's why we don't want to increment this A. Leave the A alone. That's why we have this temporary variable. So that's pretty much going to be it for this outer for loop. It's going to go through the entire outer array. It's going to be it for this if statement, which is going to check if the character we're looking at is equal to the start of our needle. And then we have this inner for loop, which is going to run through the needle, comparing it to every character with the respective length inside of our haystack. And then if they are not equal to, we'll break. If it is equal to and we're at the end, we're just going to return A. Now, in this function, we want to return a -1 if the needle is not part of our haystack. So we're either going to return A right here, which is what we want, or we are going to be completely done with this for loop, still in the method, and just return a -1. Let's see what we get if we can submit this. And we have an issue here. It's going to be in this if statement. Try to space out your code better. I have a bad habit of not. We want to compare characters. We're trying to compare two different things. That's not okay, and I don't even think this is a valid operation. So what we want to do is have the charAt, the character at the specific index for our haystack, to compare it to the character at the specific index for our needle. This should also be a less than or equal to, because we want to run it up until the last element with respect to these two subtracting from each other. And make sure you spell everything correctly. That is important as well. With all that done, we've run this in 1 milliseconds, 41.52 megabytes of memory. Not the best memory, okay runtime, but that's how I would do this LeetCode. And looking at it just now, I didn't have this in my notes, but it looks like this for loop, we don't need to run it for the entire haystack length. Instead, let's try the needle length, but we don't need to run it for the entire string of our haystack, because haystack most likely is bigger than our needle, though there might be some test cases where the needle is bigger than the haystack. It would be handled in these for loops, but again, you don't need to run it the full length of our haystack because needle is most likely shorter. They'll both work. If you have any questions about LeetCode, leave a comment below, and if you want more Java practice for LeetCodes, check out the description below the like button.